Hi, welcome to DOD official mailroom of ChartertoConductor. Train lovers, parking all others will be violators will be strapped to the tracks. This is a ChartertoConductor video, continuing our truck video, and actually we're going to tell you about the air compressor thing that I told you about earlier. These two air compressors are filled number 1 and number 2 reserves for the main air riser, equalizer, and brake pipe. And then we thought about putting them all on the same drive and then driving an extra alternator generator. Notice these two lines are split. This gave me an idea. You had your main equalizer brake pipe reservoir, right? And I'll show you that later. Notice about how they're split in two. That will come in handy. That will give us a So what we did in the previous video is we took the air compressor and we busted to an empty to 2 cylinders, and then we signed it with our name, Adam. It's upside down, but it's a cord, and it's basically sand from Florida and grease, and it makes the best brazing rods ever, like old school type shit. So we were looking at the brake. Here was the Cummins motor, and then the drive shaft to the first main SKO engine, or 2-cylinder main air compressor. And then it shows you how the fills into the reservoir and into the lining with the number 1 and number 2 reservoir. All right. We'll sit down for a minute and I'll show you some more. Alright, so what we were talking about was a generator, and we took what we got here is something I like to call a reservoir accumulator for the brakes. This is my own design. This is a main generator. I said, hell, that looks like a pretty good reservoir, right? Whether reservoir, and this looks like springs, but it's not. These are coils. It's not even close to a generator, but it's an accumulator reservoir. All right, what one part of this is, it actually has like a jack that lifts it up, okay? The other part would be a fuel filter, which is used as an accumulator with a bypass, and then we'll catch up. All right. Then I was like, okay, where those springs lit, how about we put some check valve in a cutoff valve? And what we got here is some handouts to show you the drawing. Remember this, these are your standard pressure settings, retaining valves. Those will come in handy. And then you have your auxiliary reservoir, release, brake pipe, and sectional cutout cock. And then this shows you the different ones from direct exhaust, high pressure, low pressure, slow direct exhaust. All right, this is an accumulator. This is what you had in your number 1, number 2 reserves. It builds up air for the rest of the train line for the braking system. And all right, this is a priority valve, not really used. Let's see, we got this picture. This one is an actuated sequence valve, not important. Photocopy, didn't photocopy to the edge of the paper. All right, so we had 2 of these, and then this is your branch cutout again. All right, we started, like back in the day, I was like, hey man, how do I draw a good oil reserve thing that will spin? But this one doesn't spin, but it does show a previous attempt at something of the sort. Like, all right, which brings me to, I was looking at the brake underneath the braking equipment, and I came up with the K14K brake valve, and it shows the transfer valve and the cutout cock valve, and I put those down on a piece of paper where I scribble, like where these coils would go, right? So now you have your own version of the K4 cutout valve. You have your jack, which is on a plunger type thing where there's one X seal and one seal going in from the check valve. So it will push this, the diaphragm of the accumulator. The accumulator has a ball check, which is usually a pipe, but it's left open, and then it goes into what's called a thing, goes through the fuel filter. Over here we have some hydraulic reservoir pressurized fluid going through a valve system. It links up, looks like this one, but the whole thing's grease except for the air that's going into it, and maybe a little bit in the accumulator, which gives you this dog wheel right here at the ball check valve, which keeps it from interlocking. This little slip, it gives it a little bit of play so it doesn't lock up in the middle. And then you have, so you had your check valve, these are the previous arts, and then so you had your two valves on the sides acting like a two pump cylinder, check valves, fuel filter, which is not a fuel filter, but it came in the accumulator case, and then it has a nice little cord out here, which when swapped with a brake line will relieve the pressure in the accumulator, which had the dog accumulator there. And then we did some piston work. These are flow. I don't have the paper ready handy, but this is a plunger with two holes, and it will cover the holes, and it has one main. That's what this pressure goes in here. This from your accumulator, it goes through the fuel filter, or should I say the hydraulic filter, sorry. And then you got a relief pressure valve, and it can also act as a relief vacuum valve depending if you let it go. And here's the little O outlet, and it shows you it's connectable, and then it pours back into the front, this valve right here. Inside, this valve travels in a circle along the side. So it's just basically one big pool except for this one hose connection right here, which is shown in a cutout cock. And then two cutout cocks over here on this side of the plunger, the hydraulic piston, double piston, with those other actuating with these power pistons on that. And I think that explains it. But what it does is it takes, instead of just a regular tank like you find on a say maybe like a welding tank, a little cylinder. This is actually, when you apply the brakes, it builds so much force that it like is great for trains. That's my idea. Like, so we got your two cutoff valves, a main equalizer reservoir actuating, and now let's get to, I've showed you some of the pipe work. So this my friend is my accumulator reservoir pressure vacuum plus release system. That if this is not an electric generator, if you don't want an electric generator, which is cool because it could be an electric generator powered with an air compressor to give their own main reserves without the using a diesel engine, just using the air compressors. And but if you leave it to my vacuum the accumulator reservoir, power piston, and relief and vacuum, you'll have, which is this shape right here. I looked at the shape of the first page and I said, hell, this generator can be my perfect brake pop. It pops the brakes, so the brake is actually a lot stronger than it would be. Kind of my own gimmick there. This is the original. Alright, so this was one air compressor. This shows the fitting lines into the number one reservoir, number 2 reservoir powering this pipe, and leaving the center actuating pipe alone, which is also covered in this first top drawing, minus this. So what we're looking at is what we had on this page right here, minus these boxes, which are like exhaust systems for the motor. And then we're going to peel these off while I number them. So this was number 1 for the top. And this shows, if you can see over top of it, you see 2 air compressors with their lines. Sorry, the bottom one got moved. Well, there's your 2. If you were to have 2, just 2 of them going back to the regular air main equalizer, if 2 of them connected with original number 1 and number 2, and then where are we here? Remember that, number 1, number 2. Hopefully I can straighten these up. I'm going to put them on real paper, but I figured it'd be easier to do a video if they were laid out, like so you could see them over top of each other. Alright, starting back with a number 1 reservoir. There's 4 of these. Alright, the number 1 reservoir, number 2 reservoir. This just shows you what we got is this, my accumulator reservoir with glad hand cutout cocks for the main rail equalizer. You notice how it's split in 2 in the other drawing. Well, there's 2 sets. And you can either, this shows the different, notice I have 1 line connecting these 2 and these 2, that's 4. If you want to shut them off, you just do a little valve right here, right on any one of these, or in any order, and this is the busing. So kind of like if you want to shut this one off and run it down through here and this way, that's fine. Or if you want to shut one and single of these off, if you want to cut those out. If you want to cut it out completely and keep it the way it was, the number 1, number 2 piston right there. And this just shows that the butter valves are in, it like can be shut off 1 by 1, or you could use the side bank after it's been well, now this one can go to here and here, which would be our number 2 cylinder powering the brake cylinder. Sorry about this opaque paper, but this is number 3. Here, this one's a little bit more easier to see. Number 1, number 2 reservoir, filling, hitting that one. Alright, so number 2 and number 1 reservoir working on the same one. Remember, I covered it up like that. That goes straight to the end of the train. Or if you want to just use this one on the reservoir and shut these off, you could have these ones split. You could split this one here and here, or in any order. So this is kind of the busing. This is 2 of them going directly into it and then back out. Or you can have 1 lane, 2 lanes, and I'll show you. So that's the accumulator reservoir pressure vacuum air brake system, reservoir accumulator. Oh, I had a blank one. I didn't know that. I guess that was kind of hard seeing. Alright, okay, so let me just show you those again now that I've moved the paper out of the way. Alright, this is without busting them back. This shows you split in half. This is the half drawing right here. So we line those up. You got number 1, number 2, filling, and then number 1 and number 2 without the side reservoir, and it's spoken for the without. Well, this one's if you have 4 of them. If you have 4 of them, you could go number 1, number 2, fill in here, and then keep going. Or you could go up and around and skip the 3rd and the 4th reservoir, which I'm sorry I didn't see underneath there. I thought I'd cover this. This is just kind of give you an idea of the braking system. So then you have your valve system like that. And like you got a valve. I can't draw right with a hammer in my camera. And then you have your busing, where it could have went up to here, or one way, or whatever you want to do. And this is number 2 and number 1. Without the accumulator, say that was the auxiliary generator, you could still use number 1 and number 2. Whether you wanted to shut this off, the valve, and then sometimes make brazing rods, brazing torch brazers, clods, or if you wanted to use it as a reserve, you could use it as a reserve. And so I have these, can't really ruin them. Running over them with the chair. All right. All right, moving on from there, you have where it goes to your controls, and then you'd be over top the truck, right here, truck, and then these would be the brake cylinders. There's 4 brakes on the truck. This one only shows 2. I planned on making that on a sled. I left a little tally page, and one more time, bringing out the glad hand and the drain cocks. This is over the reservoir that is stuck inside the center bolster, and that has hinges. This way is the end of the motor, end of the train. These are your other lines. They're hanged with hangers, and they have valves so you can shut off the reservoir inside the center of the bolster on the truck, which you've seen in the other videos. Sorry this went long, but enjoy. We're making a baby.